Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Tiffany. You've made it to the Wise Skies channel, and we are doing one of our human design support calls. This is designed for our membership. We may use the video class in another area later, but this is designed specifically for people that are members. So I'm just going to mute so we don't have background noise. But I am so excited because today we're talking about the spleen center. So we've gone through some of the different centers in human design. Leisha is going to teach. We are so blessed to have you, Leisha. I just love learning from you, and I can't wait to talk about the spleen center. It is high on my mind, and so I'm going to let you share screen if you want, or I can put mine up and share the graphic that we've made too. But if you'll just kind of kick it off for us and give us a one or two liners about what human design is in case anybody watching is brand new this month. And then we will focus our attention on the spleen center. And if anybody has special questions and we still have time, we do this call over an hour break. So, okay.
Sorry, I was trying to find my mute button.
Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, and did you want me to share just a chart to look at it, or did you want me to share the graphic? Because I didn't have the graphic pulled up, but I can get it. So
you
whatever.
get a chart and I'll get the graphic.
Primo. Okay, so I'll share my chart here just for when we get going, starting to look at the spleen. So before we do that, of course, we want to just, level set. What are we talking about here? What's human design, right? And so ultimately, there's a lot of different ways to talk about human design, but it's a system for making decisions as yourself, both the conscious and unconscious parts, the things we're aware of and are not aware of. It's the quantum of that. And it's one of the only systems that really gives the precise information that's very logical and mechanical about the things we cannot see. That are part of us as well. And so it's really the quantum of those two. And it gives us decisions, awareness for how we are designed and how we are meant to operate, without resistance in this life that we have. And so, and of course, that's different for every single person. So that's what this shows us, is really how our particular aura and energy moves in the world with all the other aura and energy going on. And it gives us this clear strategy and authority for operating as ourselves again. And it's an experiment. It's not a belief system. It's not, it's a science that is very logical and verifiable by each individual by trying it yourself, which I personally love. I'm like, don't tell me what to believe. I'll decide. So it's really empowering in that way. And yeah, I think I covered, it's really about freeing the mind and relaxing the mind so that we can actually be in the correct life that is meant for us, that we're here to have. And it's indescribable, as you start to experience that. Okay, so Tiff, do you want to add anything to, kind of what is human design, what we're talking about here?
I agree with you. It's indescribable. When human design found me, I felt like I was on an acid trip, and I'm a sober person. And so like really sober, like no booze, no alcohol, no drugs for 6.5 years, no meat. I have a very clean diet. Like there's no, nothing tripping me up hormonally, right? Like my blood work is primo. And I just felt like and that takes a lot for me, right? I'm an evidential medium. I have a psychic medium. It takes a lot to throw me off. And so I'm just so grateful to be learning this with you. I've been studying astrology for 20 years, and it's very helpful. Astrology is a gateway to human design, but it's just one of many, many layers. And so it can really be useful to have a background in astrology once you start digging in. But everything in this chart is like a layer cake, right? Like if you look at that top left corner, you see the symbol for the sun with 47.3. Everything about that has other information in it. So it's very intricate and very helpful to have an analyst like Leisha who has taken the proper steps and the proper training with the real human design. There's a lot of human design. There's a lot of astrology. There's a lot of psychics. And I'm just so glad that we have Leisha because she's really, studied for several years on the actual mechanics of the real human design. So we're super lucky. And yeah, let's talk about the spleen.
Let's do it. And I love what you said too, because we're going to talk about the spleen, and it's like, you're like, not a lot, you know, it takes a lot to take me down. I mean, that's the definition of a defined spleen right there, which Tiffany and I have. This is the spleen center here. And so let's go ahead and kind of, the last time we did one of these, Tiffany had the great idea to start with kind of like some of the ways that the undefined not self, as we say in human design, kind of not self talk of the spleen can start to, you know, kind of show up. So I was gonna go through some of those just as a fun, like, oh, yep, I hear that, you know, or like where we can start to identify what it's about. So for an undefined spleen, and we're gonna go into what the functions are and everything. It sounds like, no, let's not do that because it makes me feel insecure. I'm afraid that I will feel inadequate if I do that. I'm not gonna do that because I might fail. I'm afraid of doing that, but because I'm afraid of what the future will bring. I'm afraid of doing that because of the responsibility or the criticism. I can't do that because I might lose my connection with that person and they might leave. So it's also, you know, as a defined spleen, I also can identify with these feelings because I don't have every gate in my spleen defined. I mean, I do have 6 gates in my spleen defined, but I can still identify with those. So there's a lot of different nuances to how the not self shows up, even if we have defined spleens, right? Because they're not until we've sort of gone through the cellular alignment process, which just takes time. It's like the neurons have to get into a different pathway. They have to break up the pathway they were in and get into a different pathway as we start operating correctly. You know, there's a lot of layers of not us on top of, even if we're defined. So just naming, like, I can relate to a lot of those as a defined spleen. And of course, you know, if you're defined or undefined, I mean, the undefined spleen is, of course, the areas that we are white in our chart, is an undefined center. There's also undefined channels, all these white channels, all these white gates that we don't have an activation in red or black. Those are all not self. Those are all where we are undefined and potentially amplifying or trying to make up for that openness in some way. Not awarely, not on purpose, not as a strategic thing. It's just that started as you know, in childhood, as sort of this mind defense mechanism, right? And so, yeah, so if you have an undefined spleen or a defined spleen, it's going to inform how you're experiencing this life. So the splenic center is kind of, it's one of the, like, you know, ancient sort of oldest centers in living beings. And actually plants, animals, insects, and fish, reptiles all have splenic centers. Now, some have defined and some have undefined, but just to relate that it's really sort of this kind of survival kind of, you know, very ancient type of center and frequency. It's now, you know, where we are now in the evolution of humanity, which is what human design is all about, is it's also about full existential living, fully feeling, you know, life, and being very sensitive to, honestly, the survival, you know, being spontaneous, health and well-being. It's the immune system, it's the lymphatic system, it's the T cells, the spleen, in the physical spleen in the body. It's, you know, you know, we heard a lot of in the not self talk, it's like, I'm afraid of, that every gate in the spleen is a fear, is there's a fear of something within that gate. So, you know, for the gates that I have, the gate 48 is fear. It's called the well, the depth. It's a gate of depth, and wanting to kind of go deep, and that fits with my first line, being an investigator in my profile. But the fear of being deep, like, it's almost like the flip side of that. The fear of that depth is the fear of inadequacy. Like not thinking you have the depth, right? So everything is kind of an or not other side of the coin with human design. And like the 57 it's the gentle or intuitive clarity. So a lot of times, you know, people that sort of have more psychic abilities or can kind of pick up on things intuitively might have this gate 57 you know, activated, like Tiffany and several of my friends have the 57, and I do see that kind of pattern. Shelley, you have it too? Nice, interesting. I love that. That fits, right? That totally fits.
Do you see that? Because Shelly and I are both hope motivated, and And like 57 is the fear of tomorrow, but it's also that like grasping that hints of tomorrow, that futuristic thinking. Is there any correlation between like motivations, or specifically hope motivation? And
I imagine there is, but I almost want to like now look at every 300 charts that I have and kind of see if I see that like throughout, because it's things like that that start to reveal themselves. So that's a great question. I actually don't know the answer at this moment, but I love that, because you do both have the 57, which is fear of tomorrow. It's also this intuitive understanding, like intuitive clarity in the now. So it's like, you know, it's almost like that's kind of the flip. It's like, am I in the now or am I worried about tomorrow? You know, and so I can see why that fear is connected. And so, you know, each of these has a fear gate. And I think, Tiffany, you posted, or will post anyway, that splenic graphic, which we can also pull up.
Are you
the
not
fears?
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm sharing my screen.
Oh, sorry, guys. I'm like,
well, you can send it, or you can even put it in the chat. I don't know what kind of shareable.
Okay, I'm gonna stop share.
Oh, while you're doing that, I'm going to look at the chat because I see, okay, so Cassie, you have an undefined spleen. So this, okay, that's great. Sounds weird. That's great. We'll be able to like, you know, ask you what, if you want to share when we get into these different things, like what is that like, you know, what is that, how does that feel like to you in actual embodiment, you know? And then Tiffany, you have 7 gates, which is like, I mean, it's rare that I see someone with more gates than me activated in their spleen, but Tiffany has 1 more gate. It's just this real spontaneous, you know, nature, and like this knowing, this intuition, this instinct. Let's see here. Cassie, you have gate 50.
Is it up?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, so this is just interesting as another point of awareness. You know, we're going to talk about the actual like defined center or not, because that's going to be the foundation of everything. But, you know, you can look at your chart and say, which gates do I have, which don't I? Because if you have one, you will likely, you know, I find I really identify with the ones that I do have. I'm like, I have the 48. Yes, I have had a fear of inadequacy. Like that's a theme that I feel, you know. I don't know that the depth is there. And so it can be interesting to look at, you know, so for example, if you have, like Cassie, you're saying you have 1 gate 50 in an undefined spleen, anytime you have a gate in an undefined center, it's going to be activated depending on who you're around, who has the opposite gate that's defining the centers on either side, who is, you know, has a defined center, because now your center's being defined mechanically when you're around them. And you're going to amplify that, right? And we're going to talk about those mechanics. Or is there a transit, you know, of like, say you have gate 50 in an undefined spleen like you, Cassie, is 27 active in the transits? Well, now all of a sudden you're going to feel you're going to experience that sense of well-being in a different way because your spleen is defined. So there's all these nuances if you have it in an undefined, if you have a gate in an undefined center. It's just kind of, it really depends on who you're around and being with the correct other in the correct environment. Which
do you guys understand what, because this took me a second, is to understand like if there's a transit or if there's another person where it defines the whole channel. Do you guys understand what she's talking about? Yes. Nope. Okay, will you just go over that? Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So for example, you know, let's say we're looking
back up.
Yeah. Do you want me to share? Okay. Yeah, I'm over here forgetting that everybody can't see my mouse moving around. Okay, so you were probably doing the same thing. And we can send, oh good, you did include that spleen photo graphic. So let's say you have an undefined spleen. Now, undefined means you do not have a fixed way that you function in that area. It's going to be inconsistent. So let me back up to say, you know, we kind of said the spleen, it's more than just this, but it's basic sort of primal fears. It's well-being, immune system, literally the lymphatic system biologically. It's also intuition, instinct, survival. It's sort of this kind of feeling of health and well-being. So if you are undefined in the spleen, you have an inconsistent sense of well-being. You're not going to feel good all the time. It doesn't mean, I'll stop there. So say you're undefined, but you have just the gate 50. I'm trying to not let a bunch of stuff pop up. So say you just have the 50. So if you're undefined in the spleen, unless it's activated, you are not necessarily going to have, you're going to have a different experience that's not consistent, because it's undefined. So when someone activates it, they could have this 27. So if you have 2 gates activated, that defines the center on each side. That makes the channel. And if you have a channel, that's what the centers on each side. That's where the center definition comes in. So for me, I have 1 channel, this one right here. I have 2 defined centers because that 1 channel is activating the centers on either side. So what Tiffany was pointing at is if it's undefined, you're going to realize that some different things can define it for you. And that can be another person who has a defined spleen. Like if me and Cassie are around each other, Cassie might feel like both of my kids have undefined spleens and both their parents have defined spleens. So they feel better when they're within, aura distance from us, like they have a more consistent sense of well-being, right? And so that can happen when someone else is defined, if you're undefined for the whole center, or it can happen if they have the opposite gate from your hanging gate. A hanging gate is when you have, everything I have almost, which is undefined centers with a gate sticking off of it. Okay, and this is all human design language. So it's granted, it is another language, right? So, it's okay if it's not all kind of clicking right now.
Can I break it down to like dumb?
Yeah, bullet point that. Go for it.
That's what it
Please.
took. Either it's like an empty circle, which is undefined, which means that you're like a speaker amplifying everything, or it's closed and you're quite certain about how all of the topics of that center, right? So you're really strong in that. And then if you have a gate, like something, you have the gates, either they're defined, colored in, right? The colored in gates, that's going to give you another piece of strong information. And so if you only have half C of the whole channel, you're kind of looking to Tetris. You know how it feels? We talk about this in psychic development. When you have like that Tetris, how it just sucks it into place when it's the right thing. You kind of have that going on at the energetic level. So when you have like a right piece of information, if you're doing detective work, it like, and if you have like a wrong piece, it just kind of doesn't fit, right? Like you can't really make it fit. So I just wanted to make sure, because what you said I think is really helpful. The HD transits are different than the astrology transits. You might have seen that we're incorporating that in the Wise Skies forecasts slowly so that we don't mind blow. But there are different transits that will activate each of these. And I just wanted to slow down and make sure that there was some introduction to it because I think it's really, yeah, okay, good. So there's the transits of now.
As an example, yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't want to go. I mean, we can if we want to, but I appreciate how you said it. I would say, I guess the only slight shift I would make in what you said is when it is colored in, it's not necessarily that, I mean, it's in a way it feels more certain. It's more that you have a consistent relationship with that function of that center. So if you have a defined throat, you are more, you have a consistent way of expressing and speaking. Just as a simple, like, so, I mean, I don't know that to me, I guess that's a slight nuance, but maybe it's the same thing. I got the gate 18 correction gate. Okay. So, all right. So let's, so this is, yeah. So just to say, for example, today, actually, what a great example. Cassie, you have an undefined spleen with gate 50. Guess what you have today? You have a gate 27 in the transit. I mean, the whole world has, the globe has this transit. This 27 is it's in Mercury right now. So right now it's sort of, if I ran a chart that put the transits with your chart together, you would have a defined sacral and a defined spleen right now, which are these 2 centers. Sorry, things are popping up. Okay. So I just, yeah, I appreciate us kind of looking at that, just for a foundational piece.
Yeah.
Okay, so all 3 of your kids are undefined too. Interesting, Shelley. Yeah, it's interesting because it's like they're going to Well, let's get into the kind of the qualities, because it made so much sense to me as a mom with my kids being two undefined. In fact, one of them has a completely undefined with no gates whatsoever, which we'll talk about. Okay, so, and it's also a connection to the animal and plant world, which we mentioned. In fact, there's a story that Ra, who is the founder of Human Design, shares. I think I even have it quoted at the bottom. But if you really want to feel good, it's about going out in nature. Which, right? I mean, that makes so much sense. But it's because some of those plants have defined spleens. So as we're barefoot walking on the grass, you have to touch the plant's aura to to connect with their centers. And so they have more than one centers. I mean, I think plants have 5. No, mammals have 5. Plants have 3. Anyway, but they all splenic centers. Some defined, some not. So if you're walking in the forest, you're walking on grass, and you're getting that splenic feeling of well-being. Even trees and stuff. Now, one thing he does say is you ask the plant, because you're about to touch it. It's aura, and it's a conscious living being with a different design than humans. But I've been, ever since, like, sort of learning that mechanism in my house plants, I talk to them, of course, and everything, but I ask, can I touch your leaves? And if I don't feel like, it's like a weird instinct thing where I'm like, yeah, no, this one doesn't want to be touched, or, I mean, most of them do want to be touched. I'm defined spleen, so that probably is somehow interacting. Anyway, Tiffany, you were like, ooh, doesn't it just ring so true?
Well,
What was your thought?
No, I just love that that's what, like, these are words coming out of our mouths in 2022.
The whole thing.
Yeah, the plants having their defined spleens.
I know. It's
I lay
fascinating.
down in the yard a lot. Like, I don't forest walk, but I will lay down, and I feel like I'm crushing a lot of things. And so I usually do say, is this the okay spot for me to observe? And so I do that intuitively, right? So that's cool. I appreciate
That's
that.
great. Yeah, like it connects with the mechanism of why that feels intuitively, gate 57, right, for you to do that. And define spleen. Okay, so 55% of the population is defined, right? Has a consistent sense of well-being, that they always feel pretty good. And I'll talk about sort of what that means. And 45% of humanity have an undefined. So they have this inconsistent sense of well-being. It can be physical, mental, emotional, like otherwise, and humans have all of those experiences. So this is sort of a different quality to it. With a defined spleen, it's it's like they can be spontaneous. There's this intuition, this fixed way of sort of processing fear, because that depends on your gates, right? Like we talked about the fears. I mean, I have a consistent way that fear feels in my mind, feels in my body, feels in reaction to things, to people, to places. Like it's different depending on the people and places. That's the point, because those each have their own mechanisms with mine and connections with mine, but the way that it sort of processes in me is consistent, due to my activations and my definition. So, but a person with a defined spleen may have this sort of deeper kind of inner sense of security and like safety, just inherently. And often, and now this is so true for me, it's like a defined spleen can potentially take their health for granted, because we have this consistent sense of well-being. So we often don't identify that actually, like, you're not feeling that great, but you just keep pushing and doing the thing, because it's like you have this kind of almost like, I don't know, it's not a hard shell, but it's almost like this stronger sort of thing to knock down. And so for me, it feels like I don't feel it as much. Like, my kids are sick as hell, and I'm like, I mean, I kind of have a little, but I'm fine, now that also has to do with the actual physical effects of having a defined spleen, is you won't get sick as often. You do have an enhanced immunity in some ways, but I mean, that's the point of the undefined spleen, is to, those kids with undefined spleens are going to get sick more often, and they're going to come home with the flu, the thing that, all the things more often. But it's because that they are here to gain wisdom. Any undefined area, any white area, we're here over time to gain wisdom about what's healthy, about what affects me, about what I'm sensitive to. So it's almost like, in a way, and undefined has a little more of an advantage eventually through the life process. Maybe not as a kid, but the potential is it's almost greater than a defined spleen, because we can't really feel maybe as much what I'm sensitive to or what isn't good for my well-being. Does that make, is there any points to bring up on either side that's coming up for anyone?
I want to just say in the chat, everybody's like, yes, that checks out, because
Oh,
Camden walked around with 2 broken ankles for 5 months,
and
right?
defined spleen, Camden? I think I have your chart actually, but yeah.
And
Do
Shelly
I?
is the one that doesn't get sick, and Cassie's defined, and she's never been sick. You just don't
Oh,
know that you've been sick,
she's
Cassie.
like a defined. Interesting.
You just don't, like, it doesn't register for you, because that's how I am. And I also just want to, I think this is a good time to point out that we are conditioned to be that which we're not. So as you're starting your human design journey, if this is like, wait, I'm the opposite of that, it's because you're conditioned to be the opposite of that which you are, no matter who you are. Nobody has a harder chart. Nobody has a more difficult time. We all have a difficult time because we're, by society, by family, by evolution, we're conditioned to be that which we're not. When I was starting my business, somebody at high level, somebody said, Tiffany's not going to fail because she doesn't know that's possible, right? Yet all of the things in my chart would say, well, she's probably really afraid of success, and I wasn't. Fortunately, that conditioning worked in my favor. But I had melanoma last year, right? I just kept going, just got surgery. I just drove myself to the pharmacy after surgery without a mask
Same.
in the pharmacy, and they were
Yeah.
like, "Ma'am," I'm like, "I'm still out of it. I don't know," so
Yeah.
my point is, it's like, it's not that we don't get sick. It's that there's a resiliency factor that is survival based on that spleen mechanism, right? Does that make
Oh
sense?
yeah. And it almost like it while we can sort of stay, fight things off in a certain way, the other side of that is it has to get real bad and serious before we actually do feel it, before we actually do lay down in bed and stay there all day, before we don't give ourselves enough time to heal. That's for sure the defined spleen, um and so yeah, I mean, totally, Shelley, like literally so many examples of just where it's like, will you rest and get better? And I'm like, I'm not throwing up and doing things while, like, come on. But it's rare that I get to that point, like, I don't think I've ever had the flu. Everybody in the world has had the flu, so it's kind of stuff like that I am like, yes, I don't really get sick. I knew that. I fully identify with being defined spleens. I can feel that and see so many examples in the pattern. On the other side, though, I can see that the other side of the coin is it has to get real bad before I'll even feel it, before I'll even let myself heal or be sick, Cassie, see, yes, okay, she's undefined. I'm a big baby if I feel bad, directly to the doctor. I want to make everyone feel that way that I feel. That's undefined spleen. That's my kids for sure. They're like, I'm so sick, and I often, as a defined spleen, I'm like, you're fine. Like after a day, I'm like, all right, you're fine. But that's probably not what we should do with undefined spleens, and they need to give themselves enough time to heal, because it might take a little longer than it would for a defined spleen. So, I mean, really for everyone, it's like, give ourselves more time to heal, because we often don't, like, we feel like we're done healing, but we may need more rest, and then Shelley, all my undefined kids get migraines and just collapse for a whole day or so. It's pitiful. Yeah. And then, I mean, as a defined spleen, it's like, oh, come on, take a thing. And, but it's like, this is kind of enlightening to just watch what we can see, knowing these mechanics and the differences there. The other thing is, with the defined spleen, we are able to really handle kind of more like Western medicines, like more, maybe not harsh medicines, but in a way, right? Like prescriptions, whatever, like surgeries, we can sort of, those are okay when needed, more so than with an undefined spleen. An undefined spleen really is going to, the mechanics are that the knowledge says is that, maybe they do better with some gentler remedies, homeopathics, herbs, or, maybe energy things, or just kind of other, whatever, I get like tea. And my 2 undefined spleen kids are very open to that, like they'll take a homeopathic, they'll take a thing, and I always feel the openness there for that, and I'm like, that makes sense. So that's also interesting, because if we do, I felt better about that, because I, have had different health things and all that throughout my life. And at times I've taken prescription medicines, and, I mean, I have diabetes type 1, like I've got to take, Western stuff, like for sure, at least insulin I've got to take at this point. And so, I was always like, but I'm so herbal, I'm so natural. I like studied with an herbalist and all these things, but I have to take these prescriptions. And so this helped me to accept that, and actually just, that's you though. It's okay. You have a defined spleen. Like you can handle that, and I also do find in my own observation that people with a defined spleen do tend to, maybe a lot of them, at least in the people that I know and myself, we are into natural remedies. It's interesting. It's like, we'll almost like do that as much as we can, but then if we need to go and have some like medical help, that's okay, and it's not that it's not okay for undefined. It's just that the system may be a bit more sensitive to some of those things, or you may need less amount or something. Yeah.
Looking at everyone's chart I know and listening, I'm like, yes.
compare, pattern. Yes, that's what I do. Let me see if I hit, yeah. So again, defined spleen, another way to say it is like we often overload our system, because we have this consistent sense of well-being. So it's like, I don't feel that. Or I'll be like, oh, I'll just drink some yerba mate and not rest, or something. I mean, that's a projector problem, but yeah, it's also just the defined spleen problem. What's that, Tiff?
I don't have that.
Yeah, you're like, I don't need to do that. But you got your sacral battery to go all day. No. Yeah. You know when enough is enough. I know. I'm learning. The wisdom. Okay. So let's see. The other thing is undefined. What I love is this language lately that I've keep hearing. It's like, must be my time to hear it that way. And maybe it's not like this realization for anyone else but me, but any center that's undefined, that center is under pressure to do that thing. So for example, if you have an undefined spleen, you're under pressure to be spontaneous. You're under pressure to be intuitive, right? Maybe, or you're under pressure to feel good. It's a pressure when you have an undefined spleen to be that thing. It can also, for the undefined, it's like the keynote is holding on to what is not good for me. So I love the way, there's some other ways that they said that that I want to share that I've seen. It's like holding on to what isn't good for me, what's not good for my well-being or healthy for me, out of perhaps a need to feel safe and secure, or a fear of not feeling safe and secure. It's almost like, trading security for well-being in a way, right? Like, it's not healthy, but somehow you feel good with them. Maybe they hook up your, hook up your spleen, and you're defined when you're with them in that relationship. Or, your kid has a defined spleen and they're in the house, so therefore you stay because, you have this defined spleen access, and it's just an awareness to watch. If you have an undefined spleen, it's just like, okay, let me just be aware of, am I holding on to what isn't good for me? Every time I have a thought, I look at my not self questions, look at my not self keynotes. And it's like, if I had undefined spleen here, it's like, am I holding on to what isn't good for me? Am I thinking I have something to prove? So that's just as an aside, I always go back to those without judgment. Just let me just ask myself this, So some other ways they say it, that it can be said with the undefined spleen, is chasing after feeling good, trying to fix the inconsistency. Maybe I need therapy. Maybe I need, this herb. Maybe I need these mood boosting things. Maybe, and it's like, or you just have an I mean, I'm sure that can be challenging. I'd love to, if anybody, has color to add to that. I'm always interested in wanting to know that kind of stuff. And so again, it's like, it's trying to be spontaneous, because you're under this pressure to be spontaneous when you're undefined spleen, but you're not necessarily built to be spontaneous, right? But the world sometimes, tell me now, so being spontaneous to kind of make the fear go away, to make the insecurity go away, to make, along those lines. Now, the wisdom though, in the undefined spleen is, again, huge potential beyond what a defined spleen could realize, right? In the same way. So it's, here to gain wisdom about health and well-being, about how you choose, about choosing the right people that are healthy and able to let go of what's not serving you in the right time right now. And I like the way that that's said. It's not serving you in the right time, because it becomes about it could be that that person might serve you, or that relationship or connection or whatever might serve you down another time. The spleen is spontaneous, it's just about right now. So, and it's accepting the inconsistency of the well-being and knowing what does make you feel like, make it fluctuate. What am I sensitive to? What is my body telling me, and all of that. And it's even being able to, because again, like Tiffany was saying, it's like a speaker box. If you're undefined, it's like, now it's amplifying, it's a bullhorn almost, in a way. So it's like being able to diagnose ill health in others, disease in others, and in the environment. That's the wisdom potential from the undefined spleen, and really just ultimately enjoying others without becoming dependent on them, So yeah, I wanted to check in and see how you guys are. Is anybody relating, or, kind of has a different way that it's, sort of feels in you, that you could add for any of these mechanics, defined or undefined? So can give my kids a break knowing they're not like me when it comes to health. Yeah, exactly, Shelly. Yeah, it's so good to know this. It's like, they're not gonna.
It's tough being a doctor and saying, oh, do this, and like, you'll feel great. Like, I feel okay. And I'm not a pushy mom, but I am let's do all these things. And they just may not feel as, I don't want to say not feel as strong, but not, feel as sure about their health. And yeah, so this is great, because now I can just give them a break and observe and say, okay, this makes sense. Like, it's okay for them to not be able to, keep going regardless of what's going on.
Yeah, to hop back
I had a baby. I had Sydney. I took my board exams like 3 days after I gave birth. All sorts of stuff, just push through.
I can relate.
I'm not sure if they could do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It really helped me as a parent knowing that my kids are not like that for me. Cause I had perfect attendance literally every year of my whole life. I never missed school. I never got sick, and so for me, I tend, of course, we expect that everyone is what we are. We expect that everyone has these definitions that we have. Everyone has a consistent sense of well-being, right? Everybody can express themselves the same way, right? Everybody has these ideas that pop in all the time and circulate, right? And it's like, no, that's the point. Everyone does not have,
well, I pride myself on my kids being themselves, but this little section is in addition to the
they're sick, and then they
wide breadth that I get them to be themselves. What?
What'd you say, Tiff?
Unless they're sick, right? And then they can't be themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Then they need to be what I am, which is it goes through real quick. But you almost feel like it's something what I'm identifying and what you're saying, the way that I feel, it's like I didn't realize that I was almost like that I was sort of expecting that in a way, or expecting it to, like, I'm like, well, we're doing all the things that I'm doing, like, what's that work for me, what's going on here, like there's some element of like it should be different than that in a way. And so I that's what I'm hearing or learning from the way you're saying that, Shelly, is I fully agree. It helped me so much to realize it's like, it's just different.
You're half my kid. You need to be like,
yes, at least halfway, right? Like this.
It should make sense, but it doesn't.
Right. And actually this makes more sense.
Camden has her hand up, so I want to get to her, and then I also have a question about fears.
So I thought that this part of my personality, as a daughter of a mother who has a defined spleen, I thought that this was conditioned in me to behave this way. She was a coach, and she was the kind of person, if you sprain your ankle during a soccer game, you come to the sidelines, you tape it up, and you get right back in. And I did that for so many years, to the point where, like, that's why I had 2 broken ankles in college, because I had no ligaments essentially in my ankles anymore. But I also like attributed it to school, and I would push through. But I think of my limited understanding of human design so far, I think I'm also a manifester. So I burn out and I get really tired, and I need mental breaks especially. So my annual schedule has been really based off school. And so I have to have a spring break. I have to have a fall break. I have to have a summer. And inevitably at the end of every semester, I crash hard and I always get sick. I always get sick in some way or another, even though I have a defined spleen. Because I think just pushing through in that way, even though mentally, physically, I feel like I can do it, I always just tank inevitably. I don't know if that will change once my like annual schedule changes, but it's been, I always kind of thought like, "Oh, my mom did this to me." And so I think I should stop blaming her for that. 'Cause it's not entirely her fault.
Exactly. I mean, that's the beautiful thing. I have a realization from what you said about so I want to share that. But that's the point of all this, right? It's like a guide for no fault living. It's no one's fault. They were conditioned. They didn't know where they were defined. Nobody, I mean, this came in 87 and then took years to spread out, you know, and get to a place where we could even learn it at this level, you know? And so, yeah, so I love that you said it. It's like in my mind, I'm like, but they did still, but like, I also see, you know, and that's part of the kind of cellular shift, the deconditioning of being aware of this. It's like, but it wasn't like, it's literally just mechanical. They didn't know they were defined. They expected, you know, whatever. And I love what you said about being non-sacral and having a defined spleen. That's what you said you have too, right? Being a manifestor with a defined spleen.
Yeah.
So you don't have a defined sacral either, which is this, if you're a generator, you have a defined sacral. So there's perhaps a different, what I'm hearing is because I can really identify with not knowing when enough is enough, but having a defined spleen. So like I push past, you know, you see the not self theme of the sacral is not knowing when enough is enough. So we keep going, we keep pushing, we drink the yerba mate, we, you know, over schedule because it's like, well, it's over this, I can just push till then. And our spleen almost like takes us to that point, but now we've overloaded it. And so now it's become to the point where we get sick. And because I can so relate to that. It's like, if I don't get sick that much, but if I do, it's going to be like a humdinger maybe for a minute, you know?
Oh yeah.
So
like infections that take me to the hospital that, you know, very nearly went septic because I just ignored it because I was too busy. You know, put in the hospital last fall because my stress level was so high that I had symptoms of like congestive heart failure, but I'm fine. But the hospital was super
right, but I'm fine. I went to class that same day.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, it was like, so what? It was a 16-hour road trip. I got 4 hours of class. Like, I'm busy, and they're like, you're not fine. Like,
and you probably, I mean, it would be interesting. Is your mom a generator? Is your mom?
I think so. Yeah.
So that I can hear that in the fact that she would just be like, let's keep going. We got to keep working, you know, jump up, like, and so there is conditioning in the sacral for sure, you know, around that. So you've got to, you know, that whole dynamic of conditioning, and then also just it could be anybody with a sacral motor around you that would. So it's kind of not her fault, but she was just the mechanism that was like in that place. That we all have that, a mom or, you know, parent. So.
Hey, Leash, will you stop sharing so that it's all of our faces? So whenever people watch the video later, it's a little bit more personable.
Totally.
Okay, cool. So the health thing, you know, I'm also reminding myself is that you were talking about medical, like how some of the defined spleens can use more Western medicine their bodies can deal with that better, integrate it better. My dad my whole family has defined spleens, everybody. And my my parents,
I like that move. Yeah.
My kids, one does, one doesn't, right? But the idea like that my dad was in pharmacy, that my daughter wants to be in pharmacy, that they're naturally drawn to these more chemically sides of things, you know, is just of note, I guess. But I want to ask you a question about fear. Are you okay, Camden? Did you get your answer? Also, you're like a real manifestor, like not an MG?
I know.
Because
I don't have your chart then.
Yeah,
I have your? Okay, anyway.
I don't think you have my chart, Leisha, but I've got it pulled up. So I don't know if you can see it, but.
Oh yeah. Wait, you have, because your will is connected to your throat. So you're a manifestor, not a projector.
Can you,
Nice. Not even an emotional manifestor. Juicy.
I know.
All emotional.
I'm like, and she's a lawyer, so she's going to be able to, right?
Keep cool, calm, and collected.
Mhm.
and not send out ripples of waves in the courtroom.
Well, I
You
sure
know.
hope so.
You got to be our lawyer
You could
on
amplify though.
wise guys. You got to be. You
Oh,
got to
I have dreams, Tiff. I have dreams.
I have dreams. There's dreams. I mean, a manifester, she's
Yeah, she can do
they
it.
don't have to be dreams. Yeah. Anyway, keep going.
Well, okay, so the question about fears, right? Like it's like because I just don't understand how to work with that. And I would also, I guess, to piggyback on the conversation so far, it's like, well, if we don't like what we're conditioned to be, or if we don't like the thing that we're being told that our chart is, or whatever, it's just an experiment. And that's where it's so freeing. We can just experiment differently. Do I want to give my kids some Western medicine drugs? See what happens. Do I want to give my kids some more grace and more time off of school? You know, do I want to push them through the soccer game? Like whatever it is, we're just on an experiment and see what works and doesn't work, right? But this fear thing is kind of tripping me up because I would definitely have been described as fearless up until, you know, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. I did everything right. Like I did the skydiving, I did my horses, we were jumping 6'3" fences through cross country and immovable, you know, water elements and all this. I was very high adrenaline. You know, I did the water ski team so that I could be the top of the pyramid. I did the jump in water skiing. Do you know what that is?
Oh,
You even have that where y'all live? It's like you hold on for dear life and you go over a ramp and you fly through the air in your water skis and you try to get as far as possible. And the more you drink, the farther you can go. That's why I can't water ski anymore, you know.
because I can't drink anymore. Yeah.
No, anyways, I had high adrenaline sports and I had no fear, right? And so I just wonder how you might interpret that, not for a personal thing, but just for everybody to learn from. Any feedback?
Well, that is really interesting. The water ski example particularly, I might, well, yeah, I want to look at, I mean, it makes me think of your, like the extremes gate, but what I do want to, oh, go ahead. Were you gonna?
I just was like, I was in the rattlesnake roundup. I was holding rattlesnakes as a scholarship thing. I do beekeeping.
That's why it's because, well, first you're a 3-5. So that's like black sheep, like gonna poke it, gonna jack with it, gonna mess it up, period. My oldest child's a 3-5. And we already know the 3-5 thing, but you also have the gate of extremes, which is, anyway, it's a whole thing, but it's the gate 15. And so I just hear some of that in there too. And you have all these spleen gates. So there's kind of this consistent way of dealing with fear, this like, you know, sort of in a way, a little bit like a secure way that you know how to deal with fear. Whereas, you know, you're not amplifying it because you're undefined. And the spleen is an awareness center. So there's 3 awareness centers. It's the ajna, which is just below the head, the spleen, and the solar plexus. The spleen is the most kind of evolved, you know, because it's the oldest as far as awareness. And so fear is really about survival, right? And intelligence. It's about, oh, I don't step off the cliff because I will die, you know? Whereas, you know, somebody with a completely undefined spleen with no gates, they may be up on the roof with paper wings and be like, look, I'm gonna fly, and jump off because they just don't even know what to be afraid of. They don't know what is, you know, what is going to lead to, you know, what is going to be a survival tactic and what is going to lead to no survival, you know? So just to name that, I think like these are primary fears that we all feel because, I mean, almost like you said, regardless of if we have the gate or defined or not, it's just, if we do, we're going to have sort of a more grounded almost way of dealing with fear. So I just hear that in your water ski jumping story, you know, with all your spleen gates defined. I mean, you have every single one except for one, you know, defined. So anyway, does that say anything? Because it's like, it's not fears like in a way that's like a negative fear. It's like, we need fear to survive. I mean, it's an intelligence thing almost. Like I need to gather the information. I need to follow my gut, follow my instinct, follow my, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, does that speak to it a little?
It does, because it just reminds me that human design words are not normal words. We can't look at fear and it doesn't mean fear. There's like a DNA hit that happens when you just use that word. That's why it's so important to be with an analyst that really knows real human design. Like, don't go off on all these offshoots in the beginning. Like, just save yourself you know, but listen to me. I've got
Save yourself. Yeah, but you're here to universalize what's practical. So that's what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's just that, like, it's not fear has a different nuance to it in human design, and it is based on survival, and we need survival because we are in the process of evolution. And even though it's like kind of like a beehive, you know, there's like the individual workers that are going to go do their individual jobs, but it's for the superorganism. I'm individual for me, but for the superorganism. So there has to be differentiation, you know. There's not like a perfect road for me to walk down, but there's an awareness road that I can walk down. And I think that, you know, looking at that spleen, that fear, survival, it's not like there's not a negative connotation to it. It's just, it's like a evolution connotation. And it's hard to get that just by looking at the words, because we so want to geek out on what we're afraid of, you know. Because it's juicy and it's emotional and we can ride the wave with it, but it's really just not even about that. It's like anyways, yes, that helped.
It's an intelligence thing. It's like a particular piece of intelligence that we get from each of those kinds of fears, you know. And if we think of fear and intelligence but it doesn't mean, you know, being afraid to live and being afraid to, you know, all the things, right? In the way that's like, I'm afraid to do that because it's more just, let me look at my fear. If it feels like fear, it may be a splenic center related thing. So you can look at the not self questions, look at what gates you have and don't have, and kind of what fears are associated with those. What are the names of those gates, you know, and just see what you can see. You know, you may not be like, oh, I got the whole answer. You know, I mean, I doubt that will be, you know, a feeling that any of us get to have all the time, but there's a clue to watch. There's some clue in there if you can kind of, you know, that for me, I've gotten into that sort of formula of like, let me look at my not self questions. Let me look at that center. Let me look at, you know, am I amplifying? Am I, you know, whatever. And how does it show up around different people at different times? Because it's a quick in the now center, you know. Thank you for putting that in there. Yeah.
Thank you for writing it out. So we're getting up on our hour. We haven't heard from Cassie, Tracy, and Corey. So if you guys had any questions or feedback or ideas or like, wow, that makes sense or that doesn't make sense, I would love to hear from you guys. If you have the ability to unmute, you might be at work doing other things. Or if you have an unrelated question, it's okay to do that here too.
This is my first time. Like, I just looked into the HD stuff, and hi everybody, by the way, I'm Corey. I just finally caught up to it. I've been seeing, you know, the HD human design. Friends have been talking about it. So I just figured out a few days ago that I am a manifesting generator. And so yeah, today was the first day that I really kind of dug into the chart with kind of y'all's help, and seeing what y'all were talking about. It helped me understand what was going on. So I think I'll probably have more to share next time, but this was so cool. I pulled up my son's chart and it really helped me. He's 5. So that really helped me just kind of see why some things are going on now that are maybe emotionally, and whenever, like, how he deals with anger or frustration. So yeah, I think I'll have a lot more to share and talk about next time, but this was just like, Tiffany, I totally get what you're saying. Like, this is kind of mind blowing. I feel close to tears just because this is like, it all makes so much sense. It's really cool. So right? I'm excited to share more next time.
Good. Yeah.
Oh my God. Corey, I literally, anytime I'm talking about it, I'm like, oh my God, like there's like, because it is so true. It's literally, it's like, there's a DNA level of knowing that it's like something, okay, whoa, this explains things that I have not been able to explain fully with other things that I've looked at. I mean, that's how I felt. So I just appreciate you sharing that's how you were feeling, because I really identify with that, like, lump in the throat, like, why are there watery eyes right now?
Yeah, exactly.
Moisture.
I'm just talking about my spleen.
I know, or your spleen, like, oh my God, lymph.
Yeah.
You know, and also I love that you said, I mean, it's happening now, the child thing, because I have a 5-year-old and he's a generator, but this is for the children. I mean, that's a very clear message from this knowledge, because we are adults learning this. So we already have, like, you know, all these things piled on top and sort of dirtying up, in a way, like gunking up who we really are, because we are now, you know, in adulthood, and we've sort of didn't realize these defense mechanisms were there, didn't realize these openness were there. But kids don't have that. They're more purely themselves than we could probably ever be at this point, being adults and going through the cleaning and deconditioning process. So if we can know that as parents, know our kids' designs, I mean, and then I just watch. I mean, there are definitely dilemmas, you know, being a projector and trying to get a generator to, you know, kid to do, and emotional, you know, definition and spleen definition, and, you know, all the things. But knowing it, then I can support and just get out of his way and let him be himself, so he can grow up loving every single red or black thing that's in his chart, whether he knows it or not. It's naturally him. I just got to get out of the way. So it's lovely to experience it with the kids. And I mean, I've seen a lot of shifts with both my kids since understanding their design, and more every day, you know.
Cool. Yeah, there's even, like, literally, as this was happening, multitasking over here, and
MGs do that, baby. Yeah.
I was reading an incident report that my son got yesterday.
Oh.
And but it so much clicked, because, like, one of his favorite teachers, who's very emotionally supportive for him, wasn't there yesterday, and he was acting a certain way last night, and both me and my husband could not understand what was going on. And then he broke down before bed and was just like, I miss Miss Gia. I miss Miss Gia. I want to see Miss Gia. And then just kind of seeing a couple of these things in his chart, like, it just all kind of made sense that would create, you know, and then him having to experience the incident and not having this person who he saw as safety and super connected with, to be there and help him through that challenge. It just all makes so much sense. So this is,
oh my gosh, yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
This is going to open so many doors. You'll probably be talking to me a lot.
Like, I love it. I mean, anybody that feels it, or doesn't, I'm like, if you ask me to talk about it, it's like, let's do this. But the other thing is, I would invite you to, and I know we're at the time, but I would invite you to look in the member area. I think it's in the member area, right, Tiffany? The one we did on solar plexus. Those recordings are there. So Corey, if you want to look at that, that could really, you could look at the solar plexus. Is he defined? Are you defined? You know, I mean, because could be a lot of, I hear some of that at play too with the emotional stuff.
Yeah.
So that could be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that before the next chat. Thank you so much.
Good. I love that. Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you. Tiff, anything else to add?
I want to quickly find the link to that, but it's in the playlist. I have it up. Just stall for one more minute and then we'll go.
Okay.
Anybody else? Other questions, fascinations, aha moments? If not, that's okay.
So Leisha, you mentioned when you took a really brief, really fuzzy glance at my chart that I'm not emotional. So, like, hearing how everybody's story with human design has been such like an emotional experience, and for me it's more it's been kind of like an okay, that makes sense. And it's kind of it's been like a different kind of like okay, so that's why kind of experience. So I haven't I'm like, I feel like I'm missing out because I'm like, I haven't cried about this yet, but
yeah. Well, I mean, when we say unemotional in human design, it means not defined in the solar plexus center, which is the one all the way to the right. That's, well, I'm not even going to pretend to do the triangle because it'll probably be backwards, but it's the one all the way to the right of the chart. And I saw that it was white for you. It's undefined. And that is a huge one to understand the mechanics of, because so when we say it's unemotional, people that are undefined emotionally are calm, cool, and collected. We're kind of like, when we're by ourselves, we can, like, if I do get triggered because I'm around a defined emotional person or the kids, whatever, I can pretty much be like, I'm going to take a minute, and in like 1 second, I'm fine. But a defined emotional person, it could take weeks, it could take hours, and you can't force the wave because they're, you know, it could have sent them into a low wave. Well, I don't have a low wave. I'm just ready to move on. Well, you can't move them on because now they're down here and we got to wait for that time to get them back up. So, I mean, being a manifester that's not emotional is like, I mean, that's, I feel a rare thing, because often emotional, what makes a manifester is that motor, we call it a motor center of the emotional system, connecting right to the throat. And so you have a motor, but it's your heart ego, and it's going to the throat. That's what makes a manifester. Sacrally undefined, has a motor to the throat. So anyway, just to say, like, yeah, that makes so much sense. And I had that same experience with human design. And every time I learned something, I'm like, yeah, but maybe for an emotionally defined person, they got to go through a whole wave. Like my other emotional manifesting friend, he's like gone through waves over the 2 years where he's like, F human design, I'm not doing this, I hate it. And I'm like, oh, low wave. Okay, I'll talk to you in like 3 weeks when you come back. I just get out of the way. I ain't confronting that. Shelly, not defined emotionally.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I remember
I'm the cool, calm, collected one. I had a friend that I fell out with, and she was like, you're volatile, you're whatever. And I'm like, what? I was like, you don't know me.
Well, that's what you can start to, when you know what you are, right. You start to hear what other people say, and then you may be a different kind of person around them too. So that's kind of the thing to look at a little bit too.
Or you're probably amplifying her emotions too. Yeah, I get projected on a lot, like being in the projected field too.
Fifth line, yeah.
Right, like people think, anyways, the projected field of the fifth line would be also something you could look at through all of your things. Do you have a 5 in anything?
Like a 0.5, yeah.
Sorry, a 0.5. So I have, I'm a 3-5, so it's in my personality side.
It's your design side. Yeah, your profile. It's in your profile, the design side. So you get projected on. Yeah.
So a lot of people think I'm somebody that I'm completely not, and it has nothing to do with me, and it's hard to
projection. Yeah.
And it's like we hear these things in pop health psychology and pop Instagram, where it's like everything's about narcissism or the projection field or whatever, and it's like not really. And it just drives me batty to see that now the right people are going to get the right information, but if you apply one of those things universally, you can really do some damage, to yourself and to others. So just knowing yourself and knowing what you're not, man, that's like the ticket. But okay, I found the link. I popped it in the chat. You guys all have it. You can, everybody that's here knows how to access this by logging into their member area, right? Like, it's not hard. It's clear. It's easy. If I can do anything to make it easier, please let me know. I love easy. I don't want to make it complicated, but it seems like you guys are good to go. Leisha, this was awesome. Thanks for talking about the spleen today, the spleen center. And I look forward, guys, we do this on the first Thursdays at noon. I appreciate your patience. We pushed this back. It was my fault. I was out of town for training. So it happened to work out great this month, but we will, going forward, we'll go back to our first Thursdays and try to stick with it. If you have feedback on the time slot, we're open to that too. We're just trying to find our rhythm with this. And it makes a difference when you're here. The questions you ask are really helpful. So I learn a lot from you guys too. So thank you for your lunch break with us today. And we'll see you next month. All right.
Thanks, guys. Bye.